Tonight, we're excited to welcome back the wonderful Ginny Mansberg. Dr. Ginny is a general practitioner, TV presenter, and authority on everything from sleep to beating stress, wellness, life balance, and a range of general health and medical related topics. Aside from her medical practice in Sydney South and her role at the University of Notre Dame, teaching medical students, Dr. Ginny is also an accomplished writer, having written 5 books, including bestseller The M Word, How to Thrive in Menopause, and her latest offering, The New Teenage, which we will be discussing tonight, written with clinical psychologist Jo Lamble. Thank you so much, Ginny, for joining us this evening. We know you're really, really busy. You've got so much going on, and we're really grateful to have you back at Drop Bio Health. I thought to start, would you be able to tell us a little bit about why you decided to write a book on teenagers?
So I actually started writing this before the pandemic, and I could already tell teenagers were not doing well. And I think the pandemic is just the cherry on the icing on the cake. Like, it's just not been great. And I would see teenagers falling apart. It just seemed much worse than when I was a teenager. And then they would often come in with their mums and dads. And honestly, you could cut the air with a knife. Nobody's doing this really well. And I have my girlfriend, Jo Lamble, who is just such a genius, and she's like my go-to guru. Whenever I have issues, I go to her for advice. And I just said, let's write this book. We've got to help parents out there because it's tough. It's tough in the era of mobile phones. It's tough in the era of social media. All of their friends are the paparazzi, just documenting carefully every single nightmare that ever happens to them. And so I just was like, let's do this. And we did it.
I love it. I mean, I picked it up and I had a plane trip to Sydney and just sort of devoured as much as I could in such a short window. I mean, my son is a tween, but I found so much of it relevant, and it really is, such a comprehensive look at everything that comes up. And I really love that because, you've got the physical and sort of medical aspects that you kind of cover around things like nutrition and sleep, which we'll get into shortly. But then also having a clinical psychologist in Jo being able to understand some of the behavioural changes and navigating some of the tricky stuff that you've mentioned as well. So excited to have you here. We also have a giveaway for this book, which we're really excited to share with our community, but we'll also be sharing a link where anyone can purchase the book. It's available in lots of different bookstores, and it's an awesome read. So we've got some questions that the community have put forward in the last couple of weeks that we'd like to ask of you, Ginny. And I thought to start off, let's go into the subject of sleep, because you talk about it a lot in this book. We know sleep's important generally, but why is it so important for teenagers in particular?
So I think there's this stereotype out there amongst parents that kids need a lot of sleep, but teens who look like adults don't need a lot of sleep. They need the same amount of sleep as us because they look like us. And yet studies have shown that they need 9 to 9.5 hours actually per night. And that's a huge amount. If you work backwards to when they wake up for school, they need to be going to bed a lot earlier than they are. And we know that less than 30% of teens actually getting enough sleep. And that is a huge problem because we know that lack of sleep in teens is not just giving you Captain, grumpy pants the next day. It's also linked to serious mental health issues, anxiety, depression, even suicide thoughts, and self-harm, risky behavior, whether it's risky sexual behavior or taking a stupid selfie and taking it to a boy and sending it to a boy, drugs, alcohol, poor academic performance, poor sporting performance, acne, low immune system, overweight, everything. It is kind of like the first place to start. And often if we can fix their sleep, we can fix everything else. And you sort of don't even get around to fixing all the other stuff, but it kind of everything falls into line because a lot of these kids are sleep deprived. And what we know from research is that the kids don't recognize it. They don't believe they're sleep deprived. Their parents don't recognize that they're sleep deprived. Their doctors don't recognize that they're sleep deprived. So you just got to do the maths. 9.5 hours per night. If they haven't been getting that for the last year, if they've only been getting 7.5 hours, they've got a massive sleep debt. We're going to start paying it back.
That's so great to know and understand. Yeah, because I'm sure a lot of us do assume that, as near adults or very much physically resembling adults, that they need the same amount of sleep as well. So, I mean, you touched on so many areas that sleep can affect pretty much everything. How can we improve teenagers' sleep? I mean, saying let's just go to bed earlier is fairly simplistic. What are some of the things that we can realistically implement in order to help improve it today?
So with every answer to all of these, Joe and I came out with our 5 C's, and it will help you as a framework to have every conversation, because if you don't have that, it's really difficult and you're just lecturing them and you've lost them the minute you walk into their room and sit on their bed, like they're out. So I think the most important thing is connection. So connectedness with your kids. And there's a bit of a process to get to connectedness with your kids. A lot of it involves listening and not talking, and taking seriously what they say and putting down your phone, or knowing when not to put down your phone and just talk when you're driving. But that comes. Collaboration. So collaborating with your teen, trying to make them part of the team of the journey together, rather than trying to overrule them and say, because I said so. That just is not helpful. But collaboration also involves other experts as well. We also want competence. So you don't want to say stuff that's wrong, because your kids have got a BS detector that is so honed on you. I can't tell you, you say one thing out of line, you've lost them. But you do need to have confidence. So you do need to have, just that, in a way, that fake it till you make it. You got to breathe, maybe practice with a girlfriend, and just, make sure that you're seeming really competent, even if you don't feel like you've got it all the time. And then the other thing is that compassion piece, because we've got to understand where they're coming from too. As much as they think your entire purpose in life is to make their life a misery, and that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they come out of your body and you just love them in a way that you didn't even realize you could love anything in your entire life that strong. And all you want is for them to be okay and for them to be safe. And you feel like it's just such a burden to keep them safe. We can also feel like they're just such terrible people and they're just so annoying and they just do everything wrong, and why are they always so rude and why are they so mean? We've got to be compassionate towards them as well. I think there's just got to be a lot of punching out and sort of understanding with each other. So taking your 5 C's into a conversation. When you want to exact change in anyone, whether it's an adult or a teen, to a certain extent, you need hearts on fire or pants on fire. And what I mean by that is, hearts on fire is you're completely inspired to change something for the better because you want something, you've seen something amazing. So your kid might have decided that they want to get into medicine, or they want to get into the local rugby team, or they want to be trying out for the netball team, or be a model. And that hearts on fire thing will, create a lot of change in your teenager. And that's possible. But a lot of the kids don't have that, and they need to have their pants on fire, which means they need to have a pretty big failure to want to change things. So whether it's failing a big exam, getting suspended from school, not getting into the sports team they thought they were going to get into, having some social issues. And it's really hard to see your child fail. And our instinct as parents is to go in there and yell at them to do a whole lot of different things so that they don't fail. But sometimes they need to hit rock bottom to want to make changes. But when they want to make changes, and to a certain extent with sleep, because it's so important, we've got to get their buy-in. We have to collaborate with them. We have to say, hey, I've found all this stuff out about sleep. And did you know, turns out you guys need 9 to 9.5 hours. I know, crazy. I had no idea. But then you're sort of collaborating with them, and you've got to bring them on the journey so that they buy in. And I can tell you, Abby, every time one of my parents who sits in front of me says, oh, I've told her, she'll never listen to that, they buy in when I talk to them about it. When I talk to them about the impact of lack of sleep, and I talk to them about what's happening in their brain and what's happening, what the consequences are, they want to feel better, and they definitely will buy in. It's just all about the way you frame it. And one of the things you've got to do is we've got to make time for sleep. So that does really mean that we've got to actually, you can't have them going to bed at midnight. So that might mean unpacking their schedule a little bit. So for example, if their schedule is overloaded and they are doing trombone, netball, tennis, debating, maths coaching, English coaching, science coaching, running training, and then they come home and dinner's like at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and they're exhausted and they're cranky at the dinner table, and that's not going well, and then they've got to start their homework and they're not getting into bed till midnight, something's got to give. And I think there are too many after school activities. These kids are told that unless they do everything, they're not going to be successful. They're not going to be the school captain. They're not going to get into uni. it's all garbage, right? Because they'll get there in their own time, but we've got to unpack their schedule. And the second thing is we've got to get their buy-in to do a tech amnesty at 9 p.m. because that's the time they need to be going to bed. And it's really early, I know, but a lot of that is going to be us buying in. You can't say to your kids, right, your phone is going off at 9 p.m., your laptop's going away at 9 p.m. And I suggest everybody puts the family's tech in the laundry, put all the charges on a 4-power, 8-power thing and charge everybody's up in the laundry, but you've got to do it too, because otherwise you're being a hypocrite and their BS detectors are going off like crazy. So the tech amnesty at 9 p.m, get their buy-in and unpack their schedules would be my sort of top tips.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the structure and the framework of the 5 C's as well that you reference throughout the book as well. Super helpful. And we will definitely be sharing those with the community in the coming days as well. We had a question that came through in regards to freedom from our community, from someone in our community. She asked, how can you strike a balance with the amount of freedom that you give when a teenager wants more, where you're both happy? That feels like a tough question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I don't think there is a one size fits all because you're the parent and you know your child. But to a certain extent, we've got to give them enough rope to make errors because nobody ever learned anything from the mistakes they didn't make. So as much as we would love to protect them from ever making a mistake and ever doing something stupid, and nobody wants to sort of get that phone call that their kid's, legless drunk and vomiting at a party, to a certain extent, they've got to be able to have enough rope to make good and bad decisions and then leverage those decisions to make other decisions. And that's how they grow, because the aim of adolescents and teenagers is to become competent adults, and we've got to pass that competency baton to them. So my suggestion, and Joe's, is to give them a little bit of rope, test the waters. How did that go? Give them a little bit of rope again. If there's a pattern of them tending to make pretty good decisions and not getting themselves into too much trouble, give them a bit more rope. And that's how you do it. If you, let's say, they come home legless drunk after, or you get called to emergency department because they're, having their stomach pumped after a particularly wild Friday night, you might say to them, look, that didn't work out that well. I think what we're going to need to do for the moment is you can go to parties as long as there are parents there and as long as I can walk in and just, say hi to the parents and make sure there's no alcohol there. So that's no problem. And then how about we try again with you having a little bit more freedom in, what do you reckon? So 6 weeks, collaborate with them and say, we're just going to bring it in a little bit. You've done so well. This was one stuff up. Let's bring it in a little bit and then let's try again. But you do it with them, with their buy-in the whole time.
Yeah, I love that. I love the transparency and the authenticity, in having them in conversation like that, bringing them on board around why you're doing it and what you're doing. That's amazing advice. Just wanted to talk a little bit, if we can, about the teenage brain. You talk about it, it's fascinating in the book. A question came that's more motivated to undertake social, channel this energy in a constructive way. Love that.
Yeah, it's great. And it's so true. I mean, you can actually see these test good functional PET scans. We actually look at the connectedness between different areas of the brain and how they light up. And teenagers are much better at taking risks than adults, and also much more aware of social connectedness. So they're much more aware of the opinions of their peers. It doesn't seem to register that much to adults, thank goodness, because it's just exhausting having to think about what everybody else thinks all the time. But that's the way they go. What do you do with that? I think we need to accept that. I think it's really good for them to understand what's happening in their brains and the fact that it's not always going to be like that. That, believe it or not, they're going to get to the stage where they really don't give a stuff what the most popular kid at school thinks. It's just not going to be that important to them, and that will be completely unexhausting for them. But that does impair their judgment at times. And it's really interesting. If you have a look at rental car companies, you can't get insurance on a rental car for any amount of money till you turn 25. And that's because at 25, sort of all those connectednesses in the brain sort of start, you've got much better executive function and your brain sort of really worked out how to wire good judgment with how much, to pay attention to your friends. And so, I think it's good for all of us to be aware of it, including the teens. And they might think that they've got the best judgment in the world. And some of them may well. And if your kid is the sort of kid who honestly 99.9 times out of 100 makes the best decisions, what are you going to restrict them for? You've got to give them wings to fly. You've got to, there's no point in holding them back. But there are some kids who are just, their brains are not developing as quickly. And you just need to keep your guardrails and your support for those kids around a little bit longer, and just maybe give them a little bit, shorter rope temporarily as they learn the skills of making really good decisions, and then give them more rope, and then be really cognizant when they make those great decisions. Celebrate that with them, because good on them. It's not easy.
Yeah, that's such wonderful advice. I wanted to talk a little bit about diet and body image. First question that came through from someone in our community asked how to address body image problems in tween or teenage girls. Again, a broad question, but I'd love to hear your answer.
Yeah, it's really tough in the age of social media, where all their friends are sort of putting thigh gap pictures on the internet, and really young girls putting what look like underwear pictures in a mirror in their bathroom, up online, on Snapchat and on Instagram, even if it's just in their Instagram story. So it sort of disappears after a little while, but it's there, and it really makes the kids who don't have great sense of body image feel really, really self-conscious. So I think what's really important is to look in the mirror at yourself. Are you always criticizing your own body? Are you always saying, God, I look so fat in this, I look horrible, and modeling really self-critical behavior? And are you constantly on a diet trying to lose weight and having an unhealthy relationship with food? Foods are there to nourish your body, and it's there to nourish everybody's body in the household, and it's not just yours. It's there for the teenagers as well. I mean, I think on the flip side of the eating disorder situation, which is really complex, and I think you've just got to be aware early, and just for parents, be very aware if your child wants to go on a new eating regime, even though it might be laudable in so many ways. They might decide that they're a true environmentalist and they want to be a vegan. To me, and there's a very good amount of research that veganism is not always, but is very often a red flag for an emerging eating disorder in a teen. And so you've got to be really aware of that and watch like a hawk, and just constantly say, I'm watching what you're eating. I'm a bit worried. We're eating for health, but just keep modeling good diet. I think there are more teenagers who are really overweight, and everybody is so terrified of causing an eating disorder in their teen that we don't say to our teen, you want to slow down on the Maccas there. And now these kids have got their own money, whether it's pocket money or whether they've got a job, and they can go to the local Maccas after school and they can get themselves whatever they want. And that can be really difficult. So I think, once again, if you're modeling a really healthy relationship with food, if you don't have the rubbish in the house, nobody needs rubbish in their house. It's just absolutely not necessary. If we eat for health, but if worse comes to worse and you don't know how to have a conversation with a kid who's really whacked on the kilos and stopped doing sport and dropped out of soccer or dropped out of netball and it seems to be sitting around on the computer or playing a lot of Fortnite and on Discord instead of sort of running around like they used to on riding their bike, then perhaps you can just go, oh my goodness, my GP just, handed my ass to me and told me I've got high blood pressure. That's it. This family's going on a health kick. I'm starting today. Will you help me? We've got to get healthier. Okay, let's just go throw out everything in our pantry. Let's just go detox the pantry. Can you help me find some healthy recipes? I've got to do something with spinach. I've got to do something with kale. Like, just throw yourself under a bus, but to have that conversation about eating healthily. But just make sure you're always modeling the right behavior rather than a really toxic relationship that so many women, me included, I hate my body. And I've been so conscious of this with my daughter, not to see sort of be modeling really unhealthy relationships with food and with our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you've touched on this, but one of the questions that came through that's super relevant is from someone who said that their son is junk food obsessed. I'm not sure how old he is, presumably a teenager. Will this ever change, and how can I get him to make healthier choices?
So with teens, if you just beat them over the head and just say, you've got to change this, you've got to change that, you can't send that selfie, you can't have those friends, you can't play Xbox all the time, they just hear you being a drag and they hear you being not understanding and not caring about them. So we just got to be clever on how we approach these kinds of things. So I think if you have junk in the house, get rid of it. You don't need it. They don't need it. Nobody needs it. It contributes in them for health. You would not believe the number of patients that I see that are like 12, 13, 14 with hypertension, high blood pressure. And it's ridiculous. And fatty liver disease. It is insane. That stuff cannot be in the house, but it's not good for you either. So let's just detox the house and get rid of it. And then in terms of having a family culture that's really healthy, it's interesting because I live in Sydney, and because I live in a city, and it feels like when I was a kid, everybody went bike riding in the street with all of our neighbours. I sound like a 50-something-year-old, which I am. But, in my day, we all went out and everybody was super active. Mm-hmm. Not with mum and dad, hell no, but with all the kids in the neighbourhood. And everybody just played heaps of sport, but there wasn't that much homework. We were not overloaded with after school activities. I didn't do after school activities. I went out into the back lane and played with all the other kids. In city life today, that can be really tough. A lot of parents don't feel safe letting their kids out into the street. And so a lot of their life happens online, but that's very sedentary. I went to Albury, which is a city on the border of New South Wales and Victoria, a little while ago, quite recently. And I was really struck by the number of families who were out and about doing stuff together. There was big family volleyball games, lots of families on bikes, riding bikes together, running together, little kids, big kids, teenagers, lots of teens were with their parents doing stuff together as a family. And it was really struck me because I don't see it that much in Sydney, but I don't think there's any reason why we can't do more as families, particularly if we're all trying to get healthier and all trying to eat healthier.
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone stands to benefit, don't they? I know a lot of parents, we've had commentary in the community from parents that have said that they're really, really busy and they do struggle, tried to get something healthy for dinner, but it's ended up being a takeaway night yet again. There was a great, case study in your book about that. Have you got some quick and easy tips for busy working parents about getting healthy meals on the table? Something I struggle with.
Yeah. So I think, I've had to learn to do this as well. And I've had to learn to take a really healthy lunch to work, because if I don't have a lunch at work, then I'm going to work through lunch. And then by 3 o'clock, I'm actually going to be faint. And the only thing in my staff room is biscuits. And I'm going to end up having 5 Monte Carlos for lunch. And that's just not a good look for anybody. So a lot of it is about being organized on the days that you're not at work. So Sundays, and everybody in the family can get involved. That's not your responsibility. That's the family's responsibility to make food for the family. So if you buy 4 capsicums and cut them all up, and, bag of snow peas, and you wash them and top and tail them and cut them all up, and you make lunch boxes, and you make it, I make Tupperware boxes, 1 salad, and I'll just sort of open that up when I get home at night. And literally, I think tonight I pan fried some tofu and just stuck that on some salad. Do I look forward to that meal? It's no gourmet meal, but it does the trick, and it's fine. And I do very similar for my lunch. I just have a box of vegetables with, a couple of boiled eggs or something like that. I think the thing that we need to remember as working parents is we are setting a great example for our children. We are showing them the work ethic. We are showing them that we are worth something, that we have a life, that people look up to us and respect us, that people pay us for our opinions, people pay us to turn up. And that is so valuable, because they say in couples counseling that you should look at your partner through the eyes of someone else. Esther Perel often says, go to a party and look at your partner socializing with other people and look at the way other people look at them, because sometimes to see your partner through the eyes of someone else is really helpful when you're not seeing them in that way.
Yeah.
In the same way, it's really good for your kids to see you through the eyes of your work colleagues. Having said all that, don't bitch about your work. If you hate it every single day, if you are getting up and slogging and you hate it, and you want to tell them about what a terrible life you're having, and you're not really advertising being an adult, you can't expect them to be really enthusiastic about the whole process. So let's just be positive. Let's bring the good energy in. We can talk about how good it is to go to work, and then just everything is about being super organized. You can buy a salad. It's not very environmentally friendly, but a salad with a cellophane top and tin of tuna on it. It's, is that the dinner I would look forward to? I wouldn't be like, but it's better than a bucket of KFC and with some mashed potato.
Definitely 10 minutes after you've eaten it as well. You feel much better after the salad.
Yeah.
I really like that point that you made in the book as well around modeling that, being an adult is great. There's freedom, there's fun, there's wins, there's accomplishments, because we can be so bogged down as well that, I think we're not selling it. We're not selling it sometimes, or I personally think we do more to sell it as well. Get them excited about the future and the possibilities there. There's so much to talk about. I think we can't have this conversation without talking about social media. It's such a huge thing in our kids' lives. What are some just general tips that you can give parents when it comes to teens and social media? How can we stay one step ahead when a lot of us, well, we all pretty much grew up without it?
Yeah. And it can be really scary. The stuff you don't know is really scary. Our parents were told that television was going to corrupt all of us and turn us into zombies. And, we didn't all turn into absolutely homicidal maniacs. We're actually okay. I think if you take your 5 C's, because there's no answer that will cover you across the board for everything. But if you get their buy-in, tell them that you're not there as a police action. You're there to help them have the best teenagehood and the best upcoming amazing adulthood. That's your job. And you want to collaborate with them to get them there. If you want, I would not go into a room and go, that's it. You get 1 hour a day on Instagram and I've got to be in the room looking at you. Because what is that telling the kids? And how do they learn to be competent on their own with social media? It teaches them how to sneak. It teaches them that if they're going to have actual time on social media, they're going to have to do it, in the dark, or sneak out at night, or go and grab the phone when you're not looking. And it makes them really angry with you, and they don't get it. The kids are so angry when they get stuffed into doing things that they don't want to do, and they don't understand it, and they haven't bought in, and they don't agree with you that they shouldn't be on social media. The reality is that a lot of these apps is how they do their socializing. That's, no one has a formal invite to a party anymore. That might be on Snapchat, or that might be on DMs in Instagram. There are different ways that they socialize that we might be locking them out of altogether. And while I think some groups, it would be good to social suicide out of them because they're a bit toxic, at the same time, you want them to be the ones making that decision that this friend or this friendship group, I could do better. I could be happier without them, rather than you trying to get in there and control everything and stop and not enable them to be really good decision makers who take control of their own life and actually make amazing, great decisions for themselves. That's the end game, right? So we just want to help them and get their buy-in rather than trying to just set a whole lot of unrealistic rules that just don't help them.
And really help them navigate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot more about social media in the book because, as it's a huge topic.
Yeah.
But, just as a general principle, I would take your 5 C's, remember your connection, remember your compassion, say to them, hey, I don't understand Snapchat. Can you explain it to me? Let them be the expert. And you know what? That goes for gaming as well. A lot of parents are freaked out by gaming. There are some games like Grand Theft Auto where, if you steal enough cars, you get to bang a hooker. I'm not in love with that whole idea, but I still wouldn't say I'd ban Grand Theft Auto. I'd say, I don't get it. Can you explain it to me? Teach me how to play it. I want to understand this better. And so ask questions rather than just go in there all guns blazing and sit on their heads, because it just makes them resentful. And much better they turn around and go, actually, this is a stupid game, but I've got all my mates on there. But now you're on Discord and all your mates are on Discord, so it doesn't really matter that you're not playing that game. You can go play a different game. That's okay.
I don't even know what Discord is. I feel very out of the loop.
Oh, it's a social media for gamers.
Right, okay. Thank you for that.
A lot of the 14-year-old boys and 15-year-old boys are spending a lot of time on Discord now.
Okay, something to look into then, definitely. Look, there's lots to cover off. I'm just trying to pick out what I think most people are going to want to hear about. I would like to just talk a little bit about hormones. Had a great question that came through from someone who said their daughter is 15. Her periods have been irregular since they started over a year ago. Is this normal? What causes irregular periods?
So after your child's ovaries spring into life and they start ovulating sporadically, admittedly, they will start to have periods. We give them about 1 to 2 years to get regular, at which point they should have a regular period. And if they don't, it is worth talking to your doctor about why that's not the case. But in most cases, it'll settle down and be reasonably regular. Now, a lot of my patients will tell me, oh, my period's completely irregular. Last month it was 26 days, then it was 27 days, then it was 29 days, and then it was 28 days. That's regular. Okay, here's what I think is irregular. Comes after 6 weeks, comes after 8 weeks, comes after 2 weeks, then comes after 7 weeks. That's irregular. That's a problem. So if it's just a couple of days out here and there, that's totally fine and totally regular. And that just means that their ovaries have worked this whole stuff out and they now know you ovulate every 28 days roughly.
So that's frequency, but while we're talking about the topic of periods, what else is sort of, I don't want to use the word normal, but sort of regular within that 1 to 2 year window in terms of sort of heaviness, pain? Can we just sort of touch on that?
Yeah. So sorry if anybody can't, I'm just say it as it is. So sorry if anyone who, if you're eating, maybe put the sandwich down. So a normal period is anywhere from 10 to 60 mils start to finish. So that's from start of day 1 to end of day 5 or day 7 or whatever it is. 10 to 60 mils. In Australia, the average is 30 mils. That's just over a tablespoon from start to finish. So anything over 80 mils, which is just slightly less than 4 tablespoons, is way too much. They're going to be losing way too much iron. If there's any clots, and I'm not talking about clot on a pad, because if the blood sits there long enough, it will clot. But if a clot comes out into the toilet, that is too heavy and your child is going to be losing way too much blood. In the vast majority of cases, there's no reason that we ever find for heavy bleeding, but there are some clotting disorders. So if your child has only ever had heavy periods, they need to go to a doctor just to screen them, make sure that they don't have any issues around clotting. And then sometimes we just put them on the pill just to lighten the periods up a little bit. That's, of course, would never be done without your consent, without your collaboration, unless, under certain circumstances, if the child did not feel safe to disclose that to you, and if the doctor felt that the child is able to make that decision for themselves and they have to document that in the notes, then they can get the pill without you. But on the whole, this is something that's done mother and daughter. There are other treatments as well. I don't think it's worth going into all of those for heavy periods, but it's not like she has to put up with it. The other thing is pain. So a bit of painful period is pretty normal. And if it goes away with a bit of ibuprofen or naproxen, that's fine. But if your daughter is missing netball practice or she's missing school or not going to a party because of pain, that is not normal. And we have 1 in 10, we think, Australian women have endometriosis, and it often starts in teenage years and it's underdiagnosed. If you had very painful periods, particularly if you know you've got endometriosis, but a lot of us don't know. A lot of us have just been told to suck it up, princess, and painful periods is just the way it is. You should never have to miss anything because of pain. And if that is happening to your daughter, please get her looked at by a doctor. There is just no need to put up with that.
So just on that, we had a question around how to prepare a teenage girl for puberty. What age, I guess, as a GP and a parent, do you think it's sort of right to be having these discussions, if any, or if it's potentially just something that's always discussed? And what can we do to help our girls prepare for their first menstruation?
So I think we don't want to scare the bejesus out of them. Like, we really don't want to sort of tell them, there's going to be a time where blood is going to come pouring out of your vagina. I mean, they're just really too young. They're just not going to understand that. But I think just being really open about our bodies, if you feel comfortable to let your child see you with no clothes on because you don't have any particular body shame issues, they're probably going to ask you some questions, and they're probably going to ask them pretty young. Mummy, why do you have hair there? Mummy, why do you have such big boobs? That kind of thing. And if you can answer it pretty factually and you name body parts and you don't go all red and shiny and run away and tell her to get out of the room so you can put some clothes on. That will probably help. And you'll probably be having those conversations from quite young. And that will be the same with sex. You know, where does a baby come from? I think these kids, if they don't feel that you are the sure ground beneath their feet, and that if you tell them something, they can bet the farm on it. You don't lie to them. You don't lie to them about where babies come from. You don't lie to them about, you know, what you and dad do, or what you do for work, or whether you've got money problems or whatever it is. If they know that if you don't want to answer something, then you say, I don't feel comfortable to answer that, but I would never lie to your kids. You need to be their safe harbor where they just know that if you've said it, it's true. So on that basis, I would let them lead the questioning. And if you feel comfortable, answer truthfully. So I don't think too many kids are going to say, Mum, what's a period? But they might have heard about it from school. And then they might come home and say, Mum, am I going to start having blood coming out of my vagina? And you can say, oh, darling, it's going to be so exciting. I can't wait for this to happen to you. This means that you are growing up and you're becoming a woman. And that is so exciting. And you know what? It sounds scary, but it's actually fine. And I'm here and I've got you, and your grandmother does it and your aunties do it and your cousins do it and we all do it. And you know what? It's fine. It's nothing to worry about. And it's just going to be great. We're going to have a big celebration. You and I are going to go out for hot chocolates when it happens, because it's so cool.
Oh,
leave it at that.
I love that. I love that. Just normalizing it. Gosh, it is normal. One last quick kind of chat around, we're talking about body image perfectionism. The question that I wanted to ask of you is about treating acne. How much do we have to put up with it? How much do teenagers have to put up with it? And what are some of the options for treatment?
So when we were teenagers, I think, Abby, am I 30 years older than you? I feel like we're probably not. But anyway,
41.
When I was a teenager in the 80s, and I was a massive pizza face, but like I had a lot of pizza face friends. I felt like everybody had acne in those days. Acne is a rare and threatened species because we got such great treatments for it, right? So at the moment, we know nothing's different. 80% of kids will get acne in teenagehood. And that might range from like, you know, a couple of blackheads and a couple of whiteheads here and there to full-blown pizza face. But no one puts up with it anymore because we've got so many amazing treatments now that are not what happened when I was a kid and my mum took me to David Jones' counter and bought a whole lot of stuff that just made everything worse because we didn't know anything about it back then. I think you need to really quickly understand that there are 4 causes of acne. So the first one is the pores, which have your oil glands in, but also tiny hairs come out of the skin. They get blocked by dead skin cells. That sets up a situation where on top of that, you've got a lot of oil, mainly from hormones. That's what happens a lot in teenagehood. An oil blocked pore is amazing situation for bacteria. They just love that skin and they go in there and infect it, and then you've got inflammation, which gives you all that redness around your face. And to try and do acne with one treatment, this is if it's bad, if you treat the bacteria with antibiotics but you don't treat the blocked pores and you don't treat the excessive oil and sebum and you allow your skin to continue to be inflamed, then that is going to be a problem. So I have written a whole chapter about it because each of those 4 things is treated slightly differently. I have to declare my conflict of interest because I do have a skincare company, but this is really a passion for me, not just because my skin was so terrible as a teenager. I mean, I really had the worst pizza face, and now I've got rosacea, which is not a lot more fun. But you have to treat all 4. And in the book, what I go through is what you can get over the counter, what you can get on prescription from your doctor to put on the face, and then what you can take orally. So that's antibiotics and then Accutane. So Accutane is the one that everybody's terrified of. It works to treat. It works amazingly well, but not everybody needs it.
So best sort of plan of attack, and I guess to sort of differentiate, we're not talking about the odd pimple, but if someone's really struggling with acne, best course of the best option is to see a GP to start with, or would a dermatologist be a good option?
Look, a lot of skincare you can get online. I mean, you don't really, a lot of the stuff is over the counter. So if you're, I would start with some over the counter stuff, and then I would move to the stronger stuff only if that doesn't work. And the main things that you just cannot get over the counter is antibiotics. Antibiotics you have to get, for whether you're putting them on the skin or you're taking them, you have to go to a doctor. And the same thing with hardcore retinoids, which are your vitamin A derivatives. So whether you're taking it as Accutane or you're putting it on your face, there are some forms of vitamin A you can actually get over the counter from skincare companies. And then there are some that you need on prescription from your doctor.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ginny. Gosh, we've covered a lot, and there's still so many questions that we didn't get to, but I want to thank you so much for your time this evening, and for just giving us such a great insight into everything wonderful and weird about the world of teenagers in today. And yeah, for anyone that's interested, there's so much. I really kind of refer to this as I think I'll be referring to it as a Bible. We'll be giving a copy of that away in the community in the coming days, so make sure you enter that competition, and we'll also be sharing links to where you can purchase that as well. But for tonight, that's where we will leave it. Ginny, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Bye.